The Boy in the Alamo, Chapter 5, Guadalupe. The main gate, where we had ridden into the Alamo, led to the big plaza, shaped like a rectangle. There were 2-story stone buildings on each side of the plaza, used as barracks. The plaza was surrounded by a stone wall about 2 feet thick and 9 or 10 feet high, with a flat top. At some distance to the right of the main gate stood the chapel, a large stone building with walls 4 feet thick. But part of the roof had fallen in, and so one end was open to the sky. Also, some of the wall between the chapel and the plaza had disappeared, and the men had thrown up a breastwork of dirt packed between 2 wooden pillars. Behind the chapel was a smaller court, and beyond this was the cattle pen, which had a picket fence. Here the stock for butchering and the horses were kept. There were about 30 head of cows in there for our food, captured from refugees from Bayar. We had 90 bushels of corn and some beans. There was a ditch of water which ran from the river into the fort, where we got our water. But Colonel Travis decided this was not safe for drinking, and we set about digging a well the first days we were there. As it was near the river, we soon got water into the well. There was not much else to do in the fort. Colonel Crockett had been assigned to the earthworks, where the wall was broken. It was the most dangerous place in the fort, and it was an honor to be assigned in this place. There were about a dozen cannon mounted on the walls around the plaza. The soldiers showed me how they went off. A charge of powder was put in the cannon, and the ball was loaded through the muzzle. Wadding was rammed against the ball to make it snug. Then priming powder was poured in the touch hole of the breech of the cannon. "Fire in the hole" was the signal for everyone to get away before it went off. I was anxious to hear the cannons go off, but it was a quiet afternoon that day, the 16th of February, and a yellow butterfly was sitting on the mouth of the cannon. Nothing happened, except that Colonel James Bonham rode off to Goliad to get him reinforcements. So far there was nobody to shoot at. But before it was over, I used to hold my head and wish they would stop shooting just for 1 minute. Dirt had been dug up and thrown against the plaza walls to make them stronger, and also to give the soldiers a place to stand. There was nothing for them to hide behind when they stood there. The top of the wall was flat and did not have any place to duck behind. The Alamo had been built as a mission and a church, not a regular fort, so it was not planned for fighting or for protection. Buck stayed at the earthworks with Colonel Crockett's men. They spent their time pitching coins in a hole against each other the way we used to throw horseshoes around the blacksmith shop in Nacogdoches. Colonel Crockett was always full of jokes, and he would josh the whole garrison to keep their spirits up. He sang songs at night, and I will never forget his singing after supper while the stars came out in the dark sky. During that week, Colonel Bowie would walk over to the earthworks and talk with Davy. During the time they were throwing up the earthworks before we got there, the colonel had fallen off the scaffolding and hurt his ribs. He didn't look good. He put his hand on my head one night and said to Colonel Crockett, "How come this Sprout's here?" "He's a stowaway," Davy said. "Stuck to us like a burr. Couldn't get rid of him at all. He's Buck Campbell's brother." "I have a weakness for children," Colonel Bowie said. "I wish he were away from here." "I doubt not you've got sprouts of your own," Davy said. "Dead," said Colonel Bowie. "Dead of the plague." His face turned very sad. "Well, maybe Billy here would like to look at that famous knife of yours," Davy said, to change the subject quick. Colonel Bowie took out his big knife and showed it to me. It was a sight to scare you. I felt the hair prickle on my head. "I wish I may be shot if it isn't enough to give a man of squeamish stomach the colic, especially before breakfast," Davy said, and ran his thumb along the knife's blade. "Colonel Crockett, you might tickle a fellow's ribs a long time with this little instrument without making him laugh. And many times I've seen a man puke at the idea of the point touching the pit of his stomach," said Colonel Bowie. I felt something dragging at the back of my coat. It was Lupe Mendoza crowding in beside me. "I want to see it too," said Lupe. "Be careful, daughter," Colonel Bowie said, and then his face turned as white as a sheet, and his eyes stared at her. "Where did you come from?" he asked hoarsely and stepped back, swaying on his feet, and the big knife was dangling in his right hand. Lupe looked scared and grabbed my hand and pushed up against my coat sleeve. "Who are you?" Colonel Bowie shouted. "Come to haunt me!" Lupe began to cry. I knew Colonel Bowie was thinking of his own child who had died. "It's Lupe Mendoza, Colonel Bowie," I said. "Captain Mendoza's little girl." Colonel Bowie sighed, and his body went limber. "Take her away, Billy," David whispered to me, "and look after her. That's an order." The next morning, Colonel Bowie came down with a fever, and he could not get up off of his cot. Mrs. Mendoza said he had typhoid, and we must not bother him. Since my commanding officer had ordered me to look after Lupe, there was nothing I could do but put up with it. But I did not feel it was man's work. However, she had spunk. She didn't beg to play girls' games, so we played battle. I was the Texas Army, and she was the enemy. We made our fort in the small court behind the chapel, and we threw up our own earthworks, and we chased each other over the rough piles we built. "I want to be the Texas Army," Lupe said finally. "It's my turn to win." "You can't be the Texas Army," I told her. "You're a Mexican, and so you have to be Santa Anna." "I am Texan," Lupe cried angrily. "I am not Mexican. I am what you are, Billy." She pronounced my name in 2 syllables. "You even talk like a Mexican," I said. Lupe hit me with her fist. She had a high temper. "I am Texan," she cried. Then we had a real battle. I pulled her hair, and she bit me, so the tooth marks showed on my wrist. Mrs. Mendoza came running out of the chapel and made us stop. "For shame," she said, "fighting with each other. Lupe, go into the chapel. Billy, I will take you to Colonel Travis. He will punish you." "No, no, madre mia," Lupe cried. "It's my fault. Don't hurt Billy." She threw her arms around her mother, begging her to let me go. "I will do the penance. I will go to my room," Lupe begged. It was nice of her. After all, it was partly my fault, too. "Very well," said Mrs. Mendoza. "Then play in peace. There's enough war here." "You're a good soldier, Lupe," I said. "You can be the Texas Army now." So we played again, and we did not have any more trouble until I fell into battle, and she insisted on nursing me. "You are the Texas Army," I told her. "You're winning. I'm the enemy." "I forgot," Lupe said, bandaging my pretend wounds with her handkerchief. "Let's go find Pedro," I said. I was tired of playing battle. We went to the cattle yard, and I whistled to Pedro, and he came and pressed against the fence. But the cows all started to moo and move around, and the horses whinnied. Lupe hung back. "Oh, come on," I said. "They can't hurt you." "I'm scared," she said, and covered her eyes with her hands. So I had to take her back to the chapel. She went and got a piece of panocha sugar and that she saved from Christmas and gave it to me. "Don't you want half?" I asked her. I could hardly remember. "Candy." She looked at it with her big brown eyes. "No," she said. "It's for you." It was the best thing I had since I had left home. After that, Lupe and I were friends.